Look at your neighbor and tell them, this is not just another year. Tell somebody else, something is about to shift. Because I didn't come here to motivate you. I came here to wake you up. You've prayed about it. You've cried about it. You've talked about it. But tonight, I'm not talking about change. I'm making one. This year will not be a repeat of last year. I refuse to drag old habits into a new season. I refuse to let fear sit in the driver's seat of my future. I refuse to stay comfortable while my destiny is calling my name. Hear me when I say this. If nothing changes, nothing changes. And today, I stand before you with a declaration in my spirit and fire in my voice. I'm going to make a change this year. Not when it's easy. Not when everyone agrees. Not when the fear disappears, but now. Because this year, I choose growth over comfort, discipline over excuses, and purpose over procrastination. This year, I'm done surviving. I'm ready to transform. Change does not begin with a feeling. It does not begin with confidence, courage, or clarity. Change begins with a decision. Long before your emotions line up, long before the fear settles down, long before you feel ready, there is a moment quiet, unseen, and often uncomfortable where you decide that you can no longer stay where you are. That decision is the birthplace of transformation. Everything else comes later. Most people are waiting to feel inspired before they move, but inspiration is not the engine of change. Decision is. Feelings are unreliable. They rise and fall with circumstances. If you wait until you feel ready, you may wait forever. But when you decide, something shifts on the inside. The decision draws a line in the sand and says, this ends here. It marks the point where excuses lose their authority and intention turns into action. A decision is powerful because it carries weight. It is not a wish and it is not a hope. A wish says, I'd like things to be different. A decision says they will be different starting now. When you decide, you stop negotiating with the part of you that wants comfort more than growth. You stop asking permission from fear. You stop explaining yourself to doubt. You stand up in your own life and take responsibility for the direction you're going. The truth is many people don't lack ability, opportunity, or resources. They lack resolve. They keep one foot in the future and one foot in the past, wondering why they feel stuck. But change demands commitment, not curiosity. You cannot flirt with transformation and expect it to change you. At some point, you have to choose fully and finally that staying the same is no longer an option. When you decide, your priorities rearrange themselves. What once felt optional becomes necessary. What once felt difficult becomes non-negotiable. The decision creates alignment between what you say you want and what you are willing to do. It brings clarity, not because all the answers appear, but because the direction becomes clear. You may not know every step, but you know you're moving forward. A real decision costs you something. It costs you comfort, familiarity, and sometimes approval. It may require you to disappoint people who benefited from you staying the same. It may require you to confront habits you've protected and excuses you've defended. But that cost is small compared to the price of remaining stuck in a life you've outgrown. Once the decision is made, momentum follows. Discipline grows out of decision. Consistency grows out of decision. Even confidence grows out of decision. You don't gain confidence and then decide you decide, and confidence catches up with you along the way. Every step you take after that decision reinforces it until what once felt impossible becomes your new normal. Change starts the moment you stop asking, can I? And start declaring, I will. That declaration is not loud for the world. It is firm in your spirit. It is the moment you take ownership of your future. And when that decision is made deep, deliberate, and unwavering, change is no longer a possibility. It is inevitable. You cannot step into a new year carrying an old way of thinking and expect a different outcome. Time changes, calendars turn, and seasons shift. But if the mind remains the same, life will repeat itself. The greatest barrier to progress is not what is happening around you, but what is happening within you. Before circumstances change, perspectives must change. Before results shift, beliefs must shift. A new year does not automatically create a new life. A renewed mindset does. Old mindsets are comfortable because they are familiar. They tell you who you've always been, what you've always done, and why things have always turned out the way they did. They explain away disappointment and justify delay. But what once protected you can eventually imprison you. The thinking that helped you survive a difficult season may be the very thinking that keeps you from thriving in the next one. Growth demands that you release mental patterns that no longer serve the future you're stepping into. Many people ask for new opportunities while holding on to old limitations. They want bigger doors to open but refuse to believe they are worthy to walk through them. They pray for increase but secretly expect failure. They speak about change while mentally rehearsing past defeats. As long as the mind is anchored to what was, it cannot fully embrace what could be. You cannot build a new future using outdated thoughts as your foundation. A renewed mindset challenges familiar narratives. It questions assumptions that have gone unexamined for years. It forces you to confront the stories you've told yourself about your abilities, your limits, and your identity. Statements like, "This is just how I am," or "This is how it's always been," lose their power when you realize they are learned beliefs, not permanent truths. What you repeatedly think eventually becomes what you expect, and what you expect often becomes what you experience. Changing your mindset is uncomfortable because it requires humility. It requires admitting that some of the things you believed were incomplete or wrong. It requires letting go of mental shortcuts that made life predictable, even if that predictability kept you stuck. But discomfort is often a sign that expansion is taking place. When the mind stretches beyond its old boundaries, resistance is natural, but so is growth. A new mindset creates new responses. Where you once reacted with fear, you begin to respond with intention. Where you once saw obstacles, you begin to see instruction. Where you once avoided responsibility, you begin to take ownership. The external circumstances may not immediately change, but your relationship to them does. And that shift in perspective alters how you move, how you speak, and how you decide. When you release old thinking, you make room for new vision. You begin to see possibilities where you once saw dead ends. You recognize potential in yourself that you once overlooked. You stop measuring your future by your past and start defining it by your purpose. A new year becomes more than a date on a calendar. It becomes a doorway into a different way of living. True transformation does not start with changing habits alone, but with changing the beliefs that drive those habits. When the mind is renewed, actions follow naturally. And when your thinking aligns with where you are going, the new season you've been waiting for finally has space to begin. Motivation is powerful, but it is unstable. It rises when things are exciting and fades when life becomes demanding. A discipline, on the other hand, does not wait for the right mood or the perfect moment. It moves forward regardless of how you feel. That is why discipline can carry you to places motivation never will. Motivation may get you started, but discipline is what keeps you going when the excitement wears off and the work remains. There will be days when you wake up inspired and ready to conquer everything in front of you, but there will be many more days when the alarm rings and nothing inside you feels energized or driven. Those are the days that shape your future. On those days, motivation offers excuses while discipline offers direction. Discipline says you move because you committed to move, not because it feels good, but because it is necessary. Discipline is not about punishment or restriction. It is about alignment. It aligns your daily actions with your long-term vision. It is the quiet force that shows up early, stays late, and does the unseen work that produces visible results later. Discipline is choosing what you want most over what you want now. It is the willingness to delay comfort in order to achieve growth. Many people wait for motivation to return before they act, not realizing that action itself often creates motivation. Discipline breaks the cycle of waiting. It creates momentum through consistency. Each disciplined step reinforces the next, building confidence and strength over time. What once felt heavy becomes lighter through repetition. What once felt impossible becomes manageable through persistence. Discipline also protects you from self-sabotage. When emotions fluctuate, discipline provides structure. It prevents temporary feelings from making permanent decisions. It anchors you when distractions call and when shortcuts tempt you. Discipline keeps you focused when the path feels long and the reward feels distant. It is the guardrail that keeps you moving forward even when doubt whispers that stopping would be easier. The greatest achievements are rarely the result of intense bursts of motivation. They are the result of small, disciplined actions repeated consistently over time. Great lives are not built in moments of excitement, but in seasons of commitment. Discipline turns ordinary days into extraordinary outcomes by refusing to let inconsistency dictate direction. When discipline becomes a part of who you are, progress no longer depends on inspiration. You stop asking yourself whether you feel like doing what needs to be done. You simply do it. That consistency builds trust within yourself. You begin to believe in your own follow-through. And that self-trust becomes a powerful source of confidence that motivation alone can never provide. Discipline does not promise ease, but it promises results. It does not eliminate struggle, but it ensures growth. It is the bridge between intention and transformation. While motivation may open the door, discipline is what walks you through it, step by step, until the life you envisioned is no longer a dream, but a lived reality. Fear often arrives disguised as a warning, but more often than not, it is an invitation. It appears not to stop you, but to reveal that you are standing at the edge of growth. Fear does not show up when you are comfortable or staying within familiar boundaries. It shows up when you are about to stretch, when you are about to risk, when you are about to become more than you have ever been. The presence of fear is not proof that something is wrong. It is evidence that something significant is within reach. Many people interpret fear as a sign to retreat, but fear usually means you are moving in the right direction. If there is no fear, there is no growth. Comfort zones are quiet, predictable, and safe, but they are also limiting. They ask nothing of you and give nothing new in return. Growth zones, on the other hand, are noisy. They challenge identity, demand courage, and require trust. Fear is the natural response when the familiar can no longer carry you forward. Fear speaks in the language of possibility gone wrong. It exaggerates risk and minimizes potential. It reminds you of past failures and projects them onto future opportunities. It asks, what if it doesn't work? But never asks, what if it does? Left unchallenged, fear becomes a gatekeeper that decides where you can go and who you can become. But fear has no authority unless you give it one. The moment you recognize fear as a signal rather than a stop sign, your relationship with it changes. You stop running from it and start walking through it. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to move forward in spite of it. Every meaningful step you take will require courage, because growth always demands something you have not yet mastered. Fear marks the gap between who you are and who you are becoming. What fear truly reveals is importance. You are not afraid of what doesn't matter. You are afraid of what has the potential to change your life. That is why fear surrounds purpose, calling, and transformation. It guards the door to expansion, hoping you will turn around before you knock. But on the other side of that door is clarity, confidence, and capability you cannot access any other way. When you choose to act in the presence of fear, something shifts internally. Fear loses its power when it is confronted. It may not disappear, but it no longer controls your movement. Each step forward weakens its grip. Each act of bravery rewrites the story you tell yourself about what you can handle. Over time, fear becomes familiar, not because it is gone, but because you have grown. Growth always feels risky before it feels rewarding. The unknown is unsettling because it requires trust without evidence. But staying the same carries its own risk, one that is quieter and more dangerous. The risk of regret. Fear warns you of failure, but it never warns you of stagnation. Yet stagnation slowly erodes potential and dims vision. When fear shows up, it is not asking you to stop. It is asking you to rise. It is asking you to believe that you are capable of more than your comfort allows. Step forward anyway. On the other side of fear is not just success or failure, but expansion. And once you step through, you will realize that fear was never the enemy. It was the doorway. There are things in life that do not attack you loudly, but weaken you slowly. They don't always look dangerous, and they don't always feel urgent, yet day by day they drain your energy, blur your focus, and steal your momentum. What drains you will eventually define you if it is not addressed. You cannot pour into your future while something is constantly emptying you in the present. Growth requires awareness of what is costing you more than it is contributing. Not everything that feels familiar is healthy. Some routines have become comfortable simply because they are repeated, not because they are productive. Some relationships remain in your life not because they are supportive, but because they are known. Over time, familiarity can disguise damage. You may not notice the drain because it happens gradually, but the effects show up in your lack of clarity, motivation, and peace. Energy is one of your most valuable resources. Where it goes determines what grows. When energy is constantly diverted to managing unnecessary stress, unresolved conflict, or unproductive habits, there is little left for progress. You cannot expect to move forward with strength when you are always recovering from what pulls you backward. Releasing what drains you is not abandonment, it is preservation. Letting go is difficult because it often involves emotion, attachment, and history. You may have invested time, effort, or identity into what is now holding you back. But history alone does not justify continuation. Something can be meaningful in one season and misaligned in another. Holding on out of loyalty to the past can quietly sabotage your future. What drains you often reveals itself through exhaustion without explanation. You feel tired even when you rest. You feel overwhelmed even when your workload is manageable. That exhaustion is not always physical, it is emotional and mental. It comes from constantly adapting to environments, conversations, or behaviors that require you to shrink, defend, or compromise your values. Over time, that internal resistance becomes heavy. Releasing what drains you creates space for focus, creativity, and renewal. When unnecessary burdens are removed, clarity returns. You begin to think more clearly, move more intentionally, and respond rather than react. The absence of constant drain allows your strength to rebuild. Peace becomes more than a temporary feeling. It becomes a stable foundation. Letting go also requires courage because it may change how others see you. Boundaries often disappoint people who benefited from your lack of them. But protecting your energy is not selfish, it is responsible. You cannot sustain growth while continuously sacrificing yourself to maintain comfort for others. You were not designed to be depleted in order to be accepted. When you release what drains you, you reclaim authority over your life. You choose alignment over obligation. You choose purpose over pressure. That decision restores momentum, direction. The weight lifts, not because life becomes easy, but because you are no longer carrying what was never meant to go with you. Progress accelerates when unnecessary weight is removed. You move faster, think clearer, and stand stronger. What you let go of determines how far you can go. And when you finally release what drains you, you make room for the strength, peace, and clarity required to become who you are meant to be. Intentions sound good, but they do not change lives. They comfort the mind while leaving behavior untouched. Many people live with the hope that wanting something badly enough will eventually make it happen, but desire without movement produces nothing. Action is the language of transformation. Until intention becomes execution, nothing in your life is required to shift. There is a quiet danger in good intentions. They give the illusion of progress without the demand of effort. You feel productive because you planned, envisioned, or talked about change, yet nothing tangible has moved. Intention can satisfy the conscience while postponing responsibility. Action, however, removes all disguise. It exposes what you truly value because it costs time, energy, and consistency. Action is often uncomfortable because it forces you into uncertainty. When you act, you risk failure, rejection, and disappointment. Intentions remain safe because they never test your limits. But growth does not happen in safety, it happens in movement. The moment you take action, you step into a space where learning, adjustment, and resilience are required. That space is where transformation occurs. Small actions matter more than dramatic plans. Consistent steps taken daily create momentum that massive intentions never will. Progress is rarely explosive. It is usually quiet and steady. When action becomes a habit, change becomes sustainable. The power is not in doing everything at once, but in doing something consistently. Each action reinforces identity, shaping who you are becoming. Action builds credibility within yourself. When you follow through, you begin to trust your own word. That trust becomes confidence, not because circumstances have changed, but because you know you can rely on your response to them. Confidence is not built by waiting for conditions to improve. It is built by acting in spite of imperfect conditions. There will never be a perfect time to act. Conditions will always be incomplete. Resources will always feel insufficient, and fear will always suggest delay. Waiting for ideal circumstances is another form of avoidance. Action does not require certainty. It requires commitment. Clarity often follows movement, not the other way around. You understand more as you do more. Action also creates accountability. Once you move, results begin to speak. You can no longer hide behind explanations or potential. What you do produces evidence, and that evidence provides feedback. Feedback refines direction and strengthens effectiveness. Action turns abstract goals into measurable reality. When action replaces intention, excuses lose their power. You stop asking why something hasn't changed and start seeing how it is changing. Even setbacks become useful because they inform your next step. Movement keeps you engaged, learning and adapting. Stagnation, on the other hand, magnifies fear and doubt. This year does not require better intentions. It requires decisive action. Action is what separates those who hope from those who transform. When you choose to move, even imperfectly, you activate momentum that intention alone can never produce. Change does not respond to what you plan to do. It responds to what you do. And when action becomes your standard, transformation is no longer a possibility. It becomes inevitable. I didn't come to announce a wish. I came to declare a decision. This is the year I stop explaining and start becoming. The year I walk by faith, not feelings. The year fear doesn't get the final vote. I'm not waiting for permission. I'm not asking for approval. I've carried this long enough, and tonight, I release it. If I fall, I'll fall forward. If I fail, I'll rise wiser. This is my moment. This is my season. And hear me clearly, I'm going to make a change this year.